Okay, so as I mentioned, I've broken the four figures we're going to try to code today up into four different videos. And hopefully you'll do them in the right order. So this is the first one, 4A, for coding the swirls. And this is what the swirls look like. And we're going to go ahead and continue here. So let's go ahead, and I've already got NetBeans open. And again, if this is the first one you're doing, you're going to pick up the day four start code, or you're going to create a working folder called day four, copy your files from yesterday into it, assuming you didn't have any trouble and everything's fine, and then open that up. So we want to, kind of keep track of our files. So if we have an issue, it's not too hard to recover. All right, let's go to our index.html. And we'll come on down here and we'll look at the index. Again, these are the check boxes that the user selects what they want. And I think the last one that I did with you was the cobweb. There's another one in here called the aster, which I'm going to give you the code for. That wasn't interesting enough really to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this markup for the cobweb checkbox and its label, paste it. And then we're going to change this, and of course we're doing the swirl now. So this will be swirl check, and that's the label that goes with this ID, which of course has to be also swirl check. And then the display text that the user is going to see, we want to change this to swirls or swirl, either one. Okay? And then let's go on over now to our code file, the JavaScript, and I'm going to go ahead and add the swirls constant here. Again, I have one called aster in the file, which is set to 8, so I'm going to make swirl 9. This probably won't matter, but I'm sort of anal about things, and basically, like I mentioned, I'm going to give you the entire code for the app, and it'll have all these ones that I didn't do inside. But in case you would want to put these in yourself, they would be, gapped in here. Okay, so we got that. And then we go on down here, and of course we have to check our swirl checkbox to see if the user wants to include it. So we'll copy the code from the cobweb for that, and come on down here, paste it in. And now instead of cobweb check, you notice we just changed that. It's swirl check. And then instead of pushing the cobweb into the figure set, oops, sorry, hit the wrong key there. It's going to add the swirl constant to the set. Okay, we're doing pretty good. Let's go on down here now to our case. And we'll go to the bottom of the case. There's the cobweb. And we're going to add the swirl in right here. So case swirl colon, and then I like to put my break in right away. That's the end of the case, and then I'll hit and put a space in between them, and then I'll type the swirl code in here. So it turns out that it works better if we have a smaller line width for the swirl. So we're going to redefine that here. So g2 dot line width equals, and we still want it to have some randomness to it. So then we're going to say math dot floor, and floor basically takes a floating point number and truncates it and goes down to the next lowest integer. And then math dot random, which you've seen before, times our factor here, which is 5, and then we'll add 1 to that. So what this does is it takes 5 times random, which will be 0 to just less than 5, which rounds it down. So it'll be from 0 to 4, and then we add 1. So we get a total range of 1 to 4 for the line width here, which is smaller than what we have above where we first set it. Okay? All right, let's put in some blank space here. And the swirl code is really simple. So there's no, I'm sorry, actually, there is a method. We're going to do that in a minute. Okay, so that means we want to save the context. So we say g2.save. And of course, we're going to then have a g2.restore when we come back. And then we're also going to stroke this g2.stroke, which actually renders our figure. We can get rid of this blank space here before the break now. And then this is going to call the swirl method. So that's going to be, whoops, I forgot something. I have to put the number of sides in there too. So num sides equals, and again, I'm going to use the math.floor and the random, and to save time, I'm going to copy it here. So I'm just going to grab this right here and go to the end of the line and then paste it in. And then we're just going to change these values. So we're going to take the floor, but now we're going to take 20 and we're going to use 3 here. So for the swirl, the number of sides isn't really the number of sides, it's the number of strokes or spokes in the swirl figure. And you can see that this is going to give me a minimum of 3 if this zeroes out, but it'll tend to be more than that, and it'll be up to basically 19 and 3, 22. Okay? All right, now we call our swirl method, and that's going to be G2 for our context, and then X and Y for our center point, and then we're going to pass the radius in and the number of sides. Okay, and then we need a semicolon there at the end. Okay, so that's all done. Now we have to add the swirl method. Let's come down here. This is the end of the drawing method, which is really long. There's the beginning of it up there. And you see how NetBeans matches that for me? So let me put a little note in there so I know that that's the end of the drawing method. We'll use a comment for that. So end of draw method. So when I have a single line comment, I start it with the 2 slashes like that. Okay, so now I'm going to put in my new function swirl here. So this is going to be function swirl. The first parameter is the context, like we've seen, then the X, then the Y, then the radius, and then the number of sides. And I think that's everything. Let me just take a quick scan. Yep, there we go. Okay. And so now this is the beginning of the function, and this is the end of the function. And we're going to go ahead and start creating our variables here. So first I have the curve depth, CD. So variable CD equals, again, this will be math. In this case, we're going to take min. Now, I think I went over this in the video already with you. So I'm taking the minimum of math.random times 0.15. Oh, I'm sorry, plus 1.5. That's important. So that won't be 0. In the worst case scenario, if math random is 0, this will be 0.15. Okay? Or if it's more than that, if it's more than 75, then the minimum will be 0.75. Okay? Now, those are values, at least the first value is one that I got by inspection. So let's see here. It seems like I've got a syntax error. CD equals math.min, math.random. Oh, okay, this is wrong place here. So let's take that out. There we go. So again, math.random returns a value from 0 to just less than 1. It's a irrational value. I didn't say that right. It's a floating point value. And then we add 15 to that. So this range is going to be from 15 to just less than 1.15. And then if it's actually greater, the min will take the 75. So really what the min does here is it prevents it from being more than 75. Now what this is it's the curve depth. So this is the amount that the line will curve away from being straight when we do the spokes. And we did this symmetrically, so we curve both the same amount. Okay? All right. So now we want to translate our context. So context dot translate, and that's going to be x and y. So that makes the center of this figure the center of our coordinate system. It just makes it easier to do calculations and figure out how to do stuff. And now we're going to have a for loop. And I'm going to go ahead and I think I'll change the code here because this is actually the spoke. So I'm going to use the value s here for spoke. So var s equals 0, and while s is less than num sides, again I mentioned that's actually the number of spokes for this figure, s plus plus, and then we create a curly brace body, and then we put the closing one in. So this is the body of our for loop. So the first thing we do is we move to the center point, and of course that's been translated, so now that's 0, 0. So we move to the center point. We could put some comments in here. Move to center. Whoops. So again, I want to watch my spelling here. I always have little typos like that. It makes the code look funky. Now we're going to do our Bezier curve. So context dot Bezier curve 2. And then this is going to be the depth, CD, times the negative radius. And that's going to be the x for the first control point. The second control, and the y for this first control point is 0.25 times negative radius. And then I don't always do this, but sometimes it's a little easier to see if we put stuff on multiple lines. So I'm going to come back over here. So what I have on this first line is the control point. So this is the x and this is the y of the first control point. That's wrong there. I got to take that out. So that'll come at the very end after I get all the parameters in. So then the next two parameters are the x and y for the second control point. And basically this is very similar. So again, it's CD times, in this case, radius. So the difference between minus radius and, whoops, I said that. I thought I typed that and I didn't. So CD times radius. Notice the difference. The first x is basically negative and the second is positive, which means that they're symmetric to the vertical y-axis. And if you remember in the video, in the presentation where I talked about this, I pointed that out to you. So then my last point here is the y for this, and this is going to be 0.75 times negative radius. And then, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so those are the two control points. Now we have the endpoint. So this is the line we're drawing to. And this is going to be 0 and negative radius. Okay, so again, I kind of showed you how all these things, where they came from. So real briefly, we go to 0, 0. We're drawing from 0, 0 to 0 negative radius, which is basically from the center point of our axis directly along the, negative radius is negative y, so that's straight up. Yeah, so we start at 0, we go straight up. And so we're drawing from the center point straight up, and then these two control points are located on either side. The first one is 1/4 of the way up, and the other is 3/4 of the way up. All right. And so what that does then is that causes it to have that S shape. And so the first curve is actually going to be like this, and then it'll rotate around and draw the second, the third, etc. And the code itself, let's see, we're going to finish this, so we need to put in the line to stroke it. So that's going to, let's go back out here. Context dot stroke. Let's see, render this line, and then here's our rotate. So context and then that's going to be math.pi, which is, oops, sorry, times 2. Oh, okay, yeah. Thought I forgot that. So math times pi times 2 divided by num side. So again, oops, got a little error in there. Fix that. Math pi times 2 is a complete circle. So this is the portion of the circle based on how many spokes we have. Okay, I think we're good here. I'll get rid of this blank space that I don't need here. Looks like everything's really good. So now what we should do is we should test our function out real quick to make sure that it works. And I'll go up here and I'm going to tell it to use Firefox, and I'll hit the green arrow to test it. And I think I have Firefox open already. So let me see. Oh, here we go. Well, let's try again there. There we go. Okay, so again, we just added the swirls. So let's go ahead and I like to do the fade when I test things just because it looks cool. So here we'll hit draw, and there are the swirls. So we're good to go. We tested our code, and we're fine. So we're going to end this video, and then I'll make another for each of the other figures that we're going to do. Okay?